NTSB investigators are back at a Boeing production plant in their effort to determine why a door plug blew off a Boeing 737 MAX 9 jet mid-flight earlier this month. The investigators are now trying to build a timeline of the incident. We have CNN aviation correspondent Pete Muntean joining us now on this story. You've been on it from the beginning here. What's the latest on the investigation?
Well, this is the first of many visits by the NTSB to Boeing. And remember that the FAA is also doing its own investigation as it ordered this grounding of the 737 MAX 9, which remains in place. Just spoke with the head of the FAA in a one-on-one interview, and he says his inspectors are on site at Boeing with a focus on quality control. FAA Administrator Mike Whitaker told me the MAX 9 door plug design is a good design, but only when it's properly executed. That's a big caveat. The bolts that hold the door plug on the plane are key. There are 4 of them. And if they are not installed, then the door can shimmy out of its retaining grooves and shoot off with explosive force, like we saw back on January 5th on Alaska 1282. Here is FAA Administrator Mike Whitaker.
The design, when it's properly executed, is a sound, safe, airworthy design. Our focus has been on production. So where we're looking now is quality assurance, quality control at Boeing. We've got inspectors on site overseeing production, examining the actual aircraft coming off the line to ensure everything is where it ought to be.
The FAA now has a sampling of data from about a quarter of the MAX 9s in the U.S. It's looking at measurements to decide what airlines will need to inspect in order to unground these planes. I also asked the FAA chief if the flying public should be afraid of the 737 MAX 9, and he told me the FAA is not going to let this plane back in the air until they are convinced this issue is taken care of.
And Boeing's CEO will be meeting with lawmakers, and they're pretty frustrated.
Yeah, and some of the meetings are taking place right now. Boeing CEO Dave Calhoun on Capitol Hill right now as Boeing is announcing this day-long safety stand-down tomorrow. We know he's going to meet with Senator Maria Cantwell today. She is one of the top Democrats who oversees the committee that oversees aviation, and she says that even after these closed-door hearings, she would like to see potentially some hearings and Boeing being held to account in public on this. So we'll see. Because
Boeing got lucky here that happened when everyone was seated at the altitude that it happened at.
No doubt.
We have to remember that.
Yeah.
Pete, thank you so much for following this throughout. Boris?
Let's discuss this further with Miles O'Brien. He's a CNN aviation analyst, pilot, and science correspondent for PBS NewsHour. Miles, thank you so much for joining us. Great to see you. If you were asking questions of these folks over at Boeing, what would you want answered?
I'd like to know about their processes. You know, one of the things that happens in the case of trying to get all these airplanes out the door is as the sub-assemblies come in, they might be put together, in this case, with the door plug in. But is it possible that the workers, to make it easier to work on the aircraft, took that door plug out and then didn't really have an official procedure for putting it back in, and as a result, some things were lost? Those kinds of little details are really important in aviation. In theory, Boris, you should be able to trace a piece of paper to every piece on that airplane, and that paper trail should lead to individuals to what they did or didn't do. And if they did, in fact, take that door plug out unofficially, you don't have that paper trail. So things like that are very important in aviation.
That's some really fascinating perspective. FAA inspectors say that they are now increasing the level of scrutiny of that production process that you're describing. What does it look like when the FAA steps in and does that sort of thing?
Well, it makes me wonder why we don't have the FAA there more often and in greater numbers. It is a matter of money, and this is an important question for Congress to address. Essentially, the airline or makers, the builders of these airliners, use their own people to do inspections. Now, clearly there's a potential conflict of interest there. Now, in the interest of aviation safety, the manufacturers would tell you that it's safe because no one wants to put an unsafe aircraft in the air. But there are subtle ways that things can be overlooked, like bolts that need to be tightened. So should the FAA step up its ongoing inspection campaign and not just be sending the troops in after you've had an incident which could have caused a much greater calamity?
And Miles, Boeing obviously not only facing scrutiny from federal inspectors and lawmakers, but its airline partners too. A lot of money is being lost because these planes are grounded. What do you anticipate the long-term impact of this is going to be for Boeing's business?
I think it's hard to overstate it when you have the CEO of United Airlines saying, you know, I may not purchase the MAX 10, the next version of the 737. You know, Boeing, Boris, was the gold standard for the world. And subsequent to its merger with McDonnell Douglas in 1997, the corporate culture changed. A lot of subcontracting came into play, a lot of outsourcing, a lot of creation of non-union jobs at other locations. Their whole philosophy changed after that merger, and a lot of people would tell you that is the root of the problem here, that there's been a fundamental corporate culture change, and that means change at the top.
Really interesting insight. Miles O'Brien, thanks so much for the update.
You're welcome, Boris.